What is going down, my YouTube family? It is your boy Zary, and we are back for a Raid Shadow Legends video. And in this one, it is Christmas time. We have the Christmas fusion upon us, and I've stated before I was passing on this fusion, no matter really who it was, because I got a lot of other projects to work on. And I'm kind of glad I did. I'm not a big fan of the champion. I mean, I take her, of course, but I got so much stuff to work on that this is a passable one for me, and I kind of like some of the other champions even better. So what we're going to do is we are going to break it down. We're going to talk about the 23 new champions, and I'm going to tell you kind of where I feel they'll be good at. So let's get into it. Alright, we're starting off in the Bannon Lawrence, and the first one is an epic champion, Kurzhod the Stone, and his A1 ability attacks one enemy, has a 15% chance of placing a stun debuff for one turn, has a 40% chance of placing a stun debuff for one turn instead if the target has more than 75% turn meter, and that can go up to a 25 and 50% chance when booked. And yeah, pretty solid A1 based on attack champion. Places is A2 Show of Valor, places a 30% increase attack buff and a 30% increase crit damage buff on this champion for 2 turns, then attacks the enemy. So much like Turvold, he's putting up all of his stuff and then going to attack. Will ignore 25% of the target's defense. Will ignore 50% of the target's defense. Instead, if the target is under a decrease defense buff. And it can go down to a 3-turn cooldown. So one thing I'm noticing right off the bat is books. A lot of books so far. You know, when I was reading the champion, and you'll notice as we go, there's just a lot of books. Passive. He's immune to fear, true fear, freeze, provoke, sleep, and stun debuffs on a 3-turn cooldown. And then he does bring an aura specifically for Doom Tower, where he's increasing resistance by 50 in Doom Tower. I don't really see him as a Doom Tower champion, because the buffs he's placing is on himself. I see him more as an arena-style champion, and that's because of his passive. I mean, being immune to fear, true fear, freeze, provoke, sleep, and stun. He could get some play in Doom Tower for the Frost Spider, because he could be immune to that freeze, but that boss seems pretty easy anyways, so far, at least on normal. But having that true fear, freeze, provoke, that's a lot of higher end arena teams, and he could be, especially 3v3, could get some playtime in there. Kind of like his kit, or his look, you know, just kind of the old school knight. So that is Kurzhod the Stone. The next one up here is Dagger, Void attack champion in the rare class, and she looks a lot like Rowan to me, but I do like her sword. I think that sword's pretty badass looking. Little crossbow on the back. She's a cool looking champion. And speed 101's pretty good. Low defense on her, but let's start with her move kit. A1 double daggers, attacks an enemy 2 times. Each critical hit decreases the target turn meter by 4%, which is a really odd rate. Precision Sabotage, level 1, attacks all enemies. Has a 50% chance of placing a 60% decreased debuff for 2 turns. That's pretty solid. Goes up to a 75% chance when booked on a 3-turn cooldown. Then we have Swordbreaker Knife, at level 1, attacks enemies, 50% chance of placing a 25% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns, and has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff instead if the target is under a decrease defense debuff. That can go all the way up to a 75% chance when booked on a 3-turn cooldown. Then she does have an aura for Faction Crypts, which is an attack, ally attack. Now, Dagger, pretty cool character. I like the way her move kit reads, but I don't know a lot about stats, but defense is important from everything I've learned, and 793 defense is pretty low, so just like most hero collectors, attack-based champions are always super hard to keep alive, and she seems like that. but she has some potential when it comes to, I would say, Fire Knight. She has the critical hits, decrease the target's turn meter by 4%, but she's hitting 2 times. She can help you clear the waves by putting on that decreased debuff, defense debuff, so that'll help out. And the decrease attack, and then the strong version of that, when she's booked, could help out. I'm seeing more of like a Fire Knight character for her, possibly Spider, but more Fire Knight. And again, you see here, 4 books on the A1. Look at those 6 books. That's 10 so far. A lot of books, man. A lot of books on these new characters. Moving on to High Elves, and we have Picsneil, and this is the Fusion Champion. You know, as always, she looks just incredible. Loving the weapons. I mean, the art in this game is just so solid. Her A1, Mistress of Glamours, attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a Veil buff on a random ally for 1 turn, cannot place a Veil buff on this champion. Again, we're seeing an attack-based champion, or damage based off attack. Grip of Winter, her A2, places a 60% decrease defense buff, or increased defense buff, and a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. Then attacks all enemies under freeze debuffs. Places a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns on all enemies that are under freeze debuff. And that's a 3-turn cooldown. So all in all, that's exceptionally solid, but we got to see where she places that freeze. If that's not in her kit, then it's a little shocking. But it comes in her A3, where she attacks 5 random enemies. Each hit has a 30% chance, that can go up to a 50% when booked, of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. Has a 100% chance of placing a freeze debuff if it hits the enemy 2 times. So it's not an AoE to me. It's a random, and that's where she gets her freeze. So you want to start with that Ice Barrage, move to the Grip of Winter. Her passive, whenever an enemy places a freeze debuff on an ally, has a 20% chance of stealing the freeze debuff and placing it on this champion instead. Has a 25% chance of filling this champion's turn meter by 25% every time they receive a freeze debuff. Has a 35% chance of removing any freeze debuff from this champion at the start of every turn. If there is multiple champions on the team with this skill, only one will activate. So you can't load up a team with her, essentially, is what they're getting at. But she's going to steal that freeze. Again, kind of like that Ice Spider, but people aren't having problems with the Ice Spider. And then she has her ally resist in arena battles by 80. She's a very, very niche, kind of unique character. She has definitely a unique kit. And her freeze on her A3 there, cooldown of 4. So she's more of like a support champion. I see her in the arena kind of with a Torment, or somebody who can put out those freezes all the time, and then she can come in and do some damage. And it's all on how hard I think she could hit, and it's based on attack, so you can get that up there. She is a legendary champion, so her defense is good, speed's okay. But I think like 3v3 arena for this champion more than anything. And if you are like using freeze as your crowd control, she could be really beneficial. Maybe put her in a freeze set herself, where if somebody goes to attack her, she has the chance of putting on that freeze, which will benefit. So I think that could help her out quite a bit. But that is Picsneil. Moving on to the Sacred Order, we have Inquisitor Chalm. And he kind of looks like Bellinor a little bit, and the other void that drops all the time. I can't think of his name right now, but looks like that. I like the detail in him, like holding on to like the prayer beads and stuff like that. And you know, he's got a little scar around his eye. So let's get into his move kit. A1 ability, attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of decreasing the duration of a random buff on that target by 1. Counterattacks with this skill each time an enemy places a debuff on an ally. These counterattacks will only deal 50% of the normal damage. If you play Dragon Champions, that's kind of how they do it as well, and it can get up to a 75% chance when booked, but again, we're seeing 7 books on the A1. Cow of Horrors A2 attacks one enemy 3 times, will ignore 25% of this target's defense, will ignore a further 25% of this target's defense for each buff on this champion, places a True Fear debuff on all allies for 1 turn if it kills an enemy. 3-turn cooldown. That is awesome. Each critical hit on his passive fills this champion's turn meter by 7%. Whenever an ally receives a Fear or True Fear debuff, this skill will instantly remove the debuff and fill the ally's turn meter by 15%. That's incredible. And then increases accuracy in Doom Tower by 60%. Now, I love Inquisitor Chalm. I think he has a lot of viability within this game as far as faction wars, Doom Tower, because you're facing a lot of teams. If you're going against a wave that puts on that Fear or True Fear, he could just be absolutely exceptional to help you out there. And I think he's going to be big in Arena. You put him in a 3v3 team, or you're going against a lot of Madame Searses or Miscreated Monsters, he can really, really help you out. And then when it comes to like the dungeons, he could be used in Fire Knight. He's got that 3-hitter, and he's increasing turn meter. That could be nice. The Fear's really not going to come into play there, but I think that could be super beneficial. And then he could be a lead in Doom Tower, so I think he's going to be, dungeon-wise, I think he's going to be, if you're struggling for multiple hitters and you pull Inquisitor Chalm, he could be used in Fire Knight. Otherwise, Doom Tower, Faction Wars, and Arena for sure. Really impressed with Inquisitor Chalm. Jumping over to Barbarians, your Karl The Scourge. Your Karl The Scourge. I love the way this guy looks. He looks like an old school, just Viking character. Love it. On his A1, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 20% chance of placing freeze. Goes up to a 30% debuff for 1 turn. It's kind of disappointing with the 1 turn. Will ignore shield buffs if there are more than 1 or more enemies under a freeze debuff. Will also ignore block damage buffs if there are 2 or more enemies under freeze, and will ignore 30% of the target's defense if there's 3 or more. So we're seeing a lot of freeze required for his A1. A2 attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff. That can go up to 100% when booked. For 3 turns, that's a long time, and has a 75% chance of placing a freeze debuff. Also steals 100% of the target's turn meter and places a 30% increased speed buff on this champion for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Third ability, attacks one enemy 3 times. If the target is under a freeze debuff, remove the debuff after attacking and place it on all enemies except the initial target. Will also attack all enemies except the initial target after the 3rd hit. The freeze debuff will be placed on all other enemies even if the initial target dies before the freeze debuff is removed on a 4-turn cooldown. So that is the way he spreads out that freeze. And then his passive ability, 5-turn cooldown, decreases the damage of this champion that he receives by 10% and increases the damage that he inflicts by 10% if there are 1 or more enemies under the freeze debuff. Increases this champion's speed by 15 and resistance by 50 if there are 2 or more enemies under the freeze debuff, and the active effect is that it places an unkillable buff on this champion for 2 turns whenever there are 3 or more under freeze. Really, really solid, but super dependent on the freeze. And then he has increased ally attack in Doom Tower by 43%. So, we saw Picsneil. Picsneil and your Karl could fit together extremely well. There could be some freeze comps, and I would love to play around if I had like Tormund, Picsneil, and your Karl. But, of course, we all know I don't. But the places I see him being used is definitely Doom Tower, Faction Wars. I see him being used in the Arena for sure. With that freeze team with Tormund would be monstrous. He is an attack-based champion. His defense is low, but he could just depending on how hard he hits and based on how high his attack is to start, I could see him just nuking people down consistently. And then one place I thought that would be interesting would be the spider bosses. Freezing the spiders, the spiderlings there, could be absolutely huge for crowd control. So I think, putting, especially with this move here, you can't freeze anyways, and the AI might not play it right, so manual-wise, but if you remove it from one spiderling, it would put it on all other spiderlings. It would be huge for crowd control in the spider battles. Next one here is Yakarin Greatblade, and Hakarin on her A1 attacks an enemy, places an extra hit if it's critical, so you're going to stack her with critical. And again, we're seeing another attack champion. She is an epic. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns after or before attacking, so you could up her damage just a little bit more, and that goes to 100% when booked. Then attacks one enemies, applies a debuff spread effect, taking 2 random debuffs from the target and placing them on all enemies. Also extends the duration of these buffs by 2 turns. Will not exceed the duration on buffs on the initial target. So it's got it's like the fingers, or if you're used to World of Warcraft, like the shaman, the chain lightning, things like that. And it's on a 4-turn cooldown. A lot of interesting things with this one, because if you put her, let's say, on a freeze team, and there's one enemy that has freeze, you can spread that freeze around and increasing, like Yakarin or Picsneil's damage, or Tormund. So that could be big, but it could also be big for decreased defense and waves. It could be, decreased speed, a lot of that stuff. So interesting mechanics there. And then on her aura, ally attack and Doom Tower by 32%. So where do I really see her being used? Could see this being used in the Ice Golem. If you have, decreased speed up on the boss, you could spread that to the minions. She would be pretty beneficial for the waves there. I think any sort of wave in the dungeons would be really, really good. I think Spider could be big on spreading those debuffs around. And then, like I said, any sort of wave in Doom Tower, Faction Wars, to help spread those buffs out, potentially increasing damage for the whole team, would be big. And she's placing on her A2, she's placing the weaken, so there's always going to be a debuff to spread to somebody. So she could be interesting, but again, attack-based, low defense, low speed. So if she can stay alive. Tiger Soul is a rare. Tiger Soul looks exactly like Soulbound Bower, pretty much. So kind of a reskin there, but it is a rare. A1 attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of placing the strong version of poison. So we are looking at 60% when booked. But again, look at all these books. 8 books. It's crazy. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing the the 15% weaken debuff for 2 turns. And again, 8 books. So we're 16 books in. That's a lot. And then places a block debuff and a 60% decrease debuff on this champion for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So you could pretty much keep up that quite a bit. That would help a lot for the spiders boss in Doom Tower. But where I really see her is clan boss. She wouldn't get the stun. Maybe she could take the brunt of that stun, and with her tiger strength she could keep it up. But an insane amount of books on her. Again, an attack-based champion. Defense is better than the other ones. Slower too. But I really see her place, if you're going to use her as a poisoner, maybe pairing her with Kale or, Frozen Banshee could be pretty beneficial. Then we have a new uncommon, Sandbow. And he just looks like he's had a rough day. But Sandbow, A1, attacks one enemy. That's all he does. Sandbow's A2, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 15% chance of placing a 15% weaken debuff for 2 turns. And honestly, Sandbow is food. So next up in the Ogryn tribe, we have Grunge Killjoy. And I just love this guy. I want him. I don't care if he sits in my vault. He just looks so freaking cool. Yeah. I love that his mace is like somebody's helm with their skull still in it. Awesome. Just grappling hook for climbing his mountain. Like, I just really, really like this character. And just go over his skills. Attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of placing block buffs. Debuff for 1 turn. That can be up to a 65% chance when booked. But again, man, just check out these books. 8 of them. Attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance. That can go up to a 70% chance on a 4-turn cooldown when he's booked of placing a bomb debuff that detonates in 1 turn. Having a bomb detonate in 1 turn is something I really want to play around with. I've watched videos of bomb teams, you know, trying them out with War Mother, and I think the guy's name is Soul Drinker, and they're just not working. So, you know, with Grunge on a 1 turn, that could be interesting. His A3 removes all debuffs from all allies and places a 15% continuous heal buff for 1 turn on each ally for every debuff removed on a 4-turn cooldown. That is pretty neat. And when I talk about where he could be used, I think that could be interesting. And then fills the turn meter of all allies by 10% whenever a bomb debuff is detonated on an enemy. Then his aura is 30% defense in faction crypts. So he's a support champion. You know, he's based off attack here. He requires a lot of books. But this continuous heal on his A3, I don't know exactly where he could be used because of the bombs, but his passive and this attacking all allies, the Nether Spider in Doom Tower, after he does that massive AoE move, you got a heal reduction champion like Mashaled or, you know, somebody like that, and you remove all those debuffs. I mean, sometimes you have 7, 8 stacks. This could be very, very big for the Nether Spider. Next one up is Roughstone. He is a rare attack champion. Defense is very low. We've been seeing a lot of people in the 800s, so that is concerning. Attacks all enemies on his basic. Okay, I'll take that. He attacks one enemy, decreases the target's max HP by 15% of the damage inflicted. And then on his A3, kills an enemy, or attacks one enemy, will ignore 50% of the target's defense, has a 50% chance of granting an extra turn if this attack is critical. So you stack some crit chance on him. This is on a 3-turn cooldown. That's pretty sweet. This is a 4-turn cooldown. He could definitely help you out with the scare boss in Doom Tower, for sure. You know, other than that, I really don't see much of a use for him. Maybe Faction Wars. But for the most part, the scare boss, if you're lacking that max HP, decreasing max HP, champion, Roughstone could do it for you. Gear Grinder, rare HP ranked champion, and that is some good HP to start with from what I've been reading and noticing. And he attacks one enemy, places a 7.5% continuous heal buff on this champion for 1 turn if the attack is critical. Heals all allies by 15% of their max HP on a 3-turn cooldown. Revives a dead ally with 50% HP and 50% turn meter. And then provides Faction Crypt's HP by 25%. So, Faction Wars, this guy could be big. Very, very big. I don't believe, when I read all the kits, that there is a Reviver in Ogryn Tribe. So he could definitely probably help you out. Because he just puts shields. Yeah, I don't think there's a Reviver. Somebody let me know down below if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think there's a Reviver in the Ogryn Tribe. Ayox, the Rememberer, and I like this champion quite a bit. He is an epic support, and on his A1, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit is a 10% chance of placing the 5% poison debuff. So that goes up to 30 when booked. It's based on attack, but that strong version of poison on an A1 is very solid. Attacks one enemy, heals all allies by 10% of their max HP. heals each ally by an extra 2.5% for each debuff on the target on a 3-turn cooldown. Awesome. A 3 places a 50% decrease attack debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Also places a 75% chance of decreasing each enemy's turn meter by 25%. Places a 30% decrease crit rate debuff on the target for 2 turns if they have 50% or more turn meter after the turn meter reduction. 3-turn cooldown, and the buff debuff chance goes up to 100%. 75% chance to place the debuff and 100% chance for the turn meter reduction. That's awesome. Passive ability increases the duration of 2 random debuffs on the attacker by 1 turn when attacked. And then Aura, ally accuracy, and Doom Tower. This guy screams clan boss to me, and I'm sure he does for you. You're going to have 10 debuffs up or more at a time, and healing that is a nice little off heal. You know, really, really kind of good off heal, because you're getting the 10%, and then if you had another 25% on top of that, because you got 10 debuffs up, that's huge. Huge. I really, really like this. And then the duration, extending the duration of the debuffs on this character is extremely good. You know, you could possibly set him up to take that stun to increase the debuffs, or you got the smash. So, I mean, that's awesome. 2 random debuffs. So hopefully it's, you know, defense and attack or poison sensitivity, something like that. I mean, that's super cool. On to Skinwalkers, we have a rare attack champion, Panthera. On her A1, attacks 1 enemy 3 times. Each critical hit is a 50% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 30%. That can go all the way up to a 75% chance. But again, $8. Crazy. Attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit is an 85% chance of placing a 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. That can go up to a 100% chance, so that's pretty solid. Places a perfect veil buff and a 30% damage buff on this champion for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. And the other one here is a 3-turn cooldown. Dungeon accuracy by 40%. Panthera, to me, you know, defense is bad, speed is slower, under 100. So you're really looking for crit rate, so you can increase turn meter. And then this is big. 100% chance on a 3-turn cooldown. You know, we have the Nether Spider. Definitely Fire Knight for sure, with the 3 hit on the A1 decreasing a little turn meter. And then the 100% heal reduction. Really big. Fire Knight, I could see if you're struggling for the heal reduction. Over to Orcs, we have Pig Sticker, and I think they ran out of skins and names. Looks just like Wyvernbane to me from my last video there, so I know what she kind of looks like. And attacks 1 enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a 50% heal reduction for 2 turns. Based on attacks, we got another attack-based champion here. 75% chance when booked. A2, attacks 1 enemy, decreases the target's max HP by 20% if of the damage inflicted on a 3-turn cooldown. Okay. And then A3 attacks 1 enemy 2 times, decreases the target's max HP by 30% of the damage inflicted on a 3-turn cooldown. And then Doom Tower battles by 21. So that's where I see her being used 100%, is Doom Tower. And especially if you're lacking the max HP attack on the Scare Boss, could be used for that heal reduction. Better than nothing if you don't have it for the Nether Spider. So, and then, you know, giving attack, at least it's something if you don't have a Doom Tower aura. But all in all, I don't think she's going to be extremely good, but could fit situationally for newer players. Sun Tribe, she looks extremely familiar. I know I've seen her. I'm going to go this one. Huntress? No. I know there's another one that I saw. Totem? Yeah, it looks like Totem. There it is. Yeah, the skull's in the same spot. It isn't uncommon. Whatever. A1, attacks 1 enemy, heals this champion by 10% of the damage inflicted. And A2, sacrifices HP equal to 10% of this champion's max HP. Then heals the target ally by 10% of their max HP. Also has a 40% chance of placing a 7.5 continuous heal buff on the ally for 1 turn. That is on a 50% booked on a 3-turn cooldown. The HP sacrifice will happen even if it kills this champion. Okay, that's awful. If this caveat wasn't there, I mean, she could be used early in the game at least, but if you're trying to, like, 3-star a level to get those achievements on the bottom in campaigns and things like that, and she dies because she's trying to heal, especially on auto, that would piss me off. So, yeah. No thanks. Nakaret the Great. Legendary from Undead Hordes. A1. Attacks 1 enemy 3 times. He's a defense-based champion, so that's kind of nice. Attacks 1 enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 20% chance of placing a 20 or 50% decrease attack debuff for 1 turn. This effect cannot be resisted. Goes up to a 30% chance when booked. Teams up with allies to attack 1 time. All allies under ally protection buff placed by this champion will join the attack. Allies joining the attack will use default skills. Grants an extra turn if this attack does not kill the target. I wonder if that extra turn is for everybody. 4-turn cooldown. And this here, placed by this champion, that's a plus, or that is just a weird little caveat because then you can't stack an ally protection team. So that's interesting. Places a block debuffs and a 50% ally protection buff and a 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So this is where you're getting the ally protection. So it's on an ally for 3 turns. Ally protection cannot be removed, so that's pretty solid. I wish that was all allies because that's going to take you a while to get there. Places a block debuffs and a 25% strengthen buff on for 3 turns on the ally with the lowest max HP at the start of each round. Also places a 50% ally protection buff on them for 6 turns. Okay, so that makes more sense. So you're putting it on 1, and then every time a round resets, you're putting them on it again. So when you're clearing out waves, you're essentially putting P2 on. Then you have your 1 move that you can probably get 1 in each wave. So yeah, you're pretty much covered. Okay. And then increases ally resist in all battles by 60. I like this guy. I like him quite a bit. And, you know, Fire Knight could be really, really interesting because you get this team up with the ally protection and then grants an extra attack if it doesn't kill the target. Well, most of the time it's not going to kill the target when he's got his shield up, right? And if you can call everybody in again, you can knock down the shield pretty quickly. 4-turn cooldown, I get it. But still. Then you could let your Cold Hearts and your Royal Guards, your turn meter reductions, just nuke the crap out of him. I see him being played in Doom Tower 2 for sure. I wonder how that goes, because one of the bosses, if you take away too much of his health, does something to you. I can't think right now. But that would be an interesting thing, but I could see him being used, especially on the non-boss waves, just blowing through them. I like him, and he's a defense-based champion. So, very, very interesting character. I wouldn't mind getting him at all. Balthus Druglord, or Druglord. Attacks 1 enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. That goes up to a 40% chance. On an A1, not bad. Attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance, 100% when booked on a 3-turn cooldown of placing a decreased crit rate debuff. A3 attacks 1 enemy, 75% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 2 turns. That goes up to 100% on a 4-turn cooldown. And then it also heals this champion by 20% of their max HP. Reflects 30% of the damage this champion receives back to the attacker. And then faction crips by defense by 30. So I definitely see this guy be used in Faction Wars. Doom Tower, if there's an Undead Horde secret room or something like that. But I could definitely see him being used in the arena as well. I mean, you're looking at decreased crit rate. Most people stack that. Provoke, and then a heal. So yeah, Faction Wars, Doom Tower for the waves. I don't really see him fitting into a boss unless you really don't have that decrease attack. But, you know, Faction Wars for sure. I think he could benefit greatly, especially with a 30% defensive lead. Over to Knights Revenant, we have Reactor Giraffe. A 1 attacks 1 enemy, 35% chance. That goes up to a 50 when booked of placing the strong version of decrease attack. He is a support champion. Heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. After healing, places a perfect veil buff for 2 turns on all allies with full HP. And places a 15% continuous heal buff for 1 turn instead if all allies less than 100%. That's a very cool move. Protecting them if they have full health, healing them to full health, or giving them a continuous heal if they're not at full health to get them there. I like that. I like the mechanics on that on a 4-turn cooldown. Revives a single ally with 60% HP and fills their turn meter by 60%, and then places a perfect veil buff on them for 3 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. That is awesome as well. 60% HP and 60% turn meter. I think that's one of the highest in the game, if I'm not mistaken. And then whenever an ally is under a veil or perfect veil buff gets a turn, it heals them by 10% of their max HP. Also increases their resistance of allies under veil and perfect veil buffs by 50. If Reactor's on the team. Okay. But still, you're healing, more healing, because, you know, you're putting them under there to... That's cool. And then ally resistance in Doom Towers by 50%. So definitely see this guy in Faction Wars as a healer. Or her. Definitely see her. I think it's a girl. Yeah. Yeah, with the dress on, I would, maybe. I don't know. And then Doom Tower for sure. Yeah, I mean, support for waves. She has the decrease attack. So if you're struggling to get through some waves on some higher dungeons, you know, Dragon wouldn't be bad. Yeah, Doom Tower for sure. And Faction Wars. I like that a lot. Bergoth the Malformed. Attacks 1 enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a continuous heal buff on this champion for 1 turn if this attack is critical. On this champion, okay. Attacks all enemies. Has a 50% chance when booked on a 4-turn cooldown of placing all provokes. And then whenever this champion is attacked, heals all allies except this champion by 20% of the damage received. Interesting character. He's an epic HP champion. Oh man, Arena for sure. 3v3 would be nice. He looks like a coffin smasher with a Davy Jones, like the guy from Resident Evil. I can't think of that guy's name either, but interesting. And also like the little World of Warcraft with the, I'm drawing a blank. The Scourge. That's what I was going for with their little poisons. But he could be an interesting character, for sure. And could definitely help you out in 3v3 arena, I'm thinking. Dwarves, Rugnar Goldgleam. Epic attack champion defense. Under 800, that's pretty low. Attacks 1 enemy. Has a 50% chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. That goes up to a 60% chance when booked. I have Mashaled now, so now I'm thinking about Mashaled. That wouldn't be a bad little combination. Sacrifices HP equal to 15% of this champion's max HP, then fills this champion's turn meter by 75% and places a shield buff on this champion equal to 20% of their max HP for 3 turns. The shield buff cannot be removed. The HP sacrifice will happen even if it kills this champion and will ignore shield and block damage buffs. 3-turn cooldown. I don't know if I like that. I love the turn meter fill. So, auto, I don't know how the AI is going to play that. And I think the AI could screw it up. Because the AI is not very good. A3 places a 50% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns. Then attacks 1 enemy. Has a 75% chance of placing a 25% weaken debuff. Also has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff if this target on the target for 2 turns before attacking. And that can go up to 100% on a 4-turn cooldown. I like that. I like that mechanic. And then increases ally attack and Doom Tower by 35%. Well, the dwarves, at least from what I've watched and read, because I'm nowhere near 21 on dwarves, is one of the hardest in Faction Wars, so I could definitely see him filling in there. And then Doom Tower for sure for dwarves. If I got him, I would probably invest in him simply for the fact of dwarves are a weak faction. But he doesn't stand out as one of the best in the patch for me. Kurzhod Depart, rare attack champion, attacks one enemy, places an extra hit if this attack is critical. The extra hit has a 30% chance of decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Can't go any higher, 30% chance on a basic, on a rare. Seems okay. Attacks all enemies. Each critical hit fills this champion's turn meter by 7.5%. So you get him to 100% crit chance. You land it on 5 people. 40% turn meter on a 3-turn cooldown. Not bad. And then places a 50% increased accuracy buff on all allies for 2 turns. Then attacks all enemies. Has a 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. That goes all the way up to 100% chance on a 3-turn cooldown. Not bad. Kurzhod, if you pull him, he could help you out if you don't have a decreased defense champion that is reliable. 3-turn cooldown isn't bad at all. Icebound Prospector. He looks like the guy we just talked about, right? Kurzhod? Yeah, he looks the exact way. Okay. And our Icebound Prospector. Uncommon attack. He has more defense than the Epic. That's crazy. Attacks one enemy. Perfect. Attacks one enemy. Has a 15% chance of placing stun for 1 turn on a 3-turn cooldown, and it can go up to 30%. Food. Yeah. Maybe early Faction Wars. But yeah, Icebound Prospector would be food for sure. So there it is, my YouTube family. There is 23 champions broke down and where I think they could be used and just my thoughts and feelings on them. And again, if you're just finding me for the first time, you're liking what you're seeing, click that subscribe button, join that XMG family. For all my XMG family members out there, you know I love you. And, we do Raid Shadow Legends, we do Dragon Champions, and we just have a lot of fun. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Love y'all. I'm out.